Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. I do hope you are well and getting results as ever through your teams. This is a weekly podcast show by myself, Matthew Haddock, that looks into all things management, leadership, and generally the world of work, designed to help you, a manager or leader, improve your skills, get a better results, and obviously drive your teams forward. This week, I want to go a little bit off track. I don't normally go in these places, but what I've been thinking around and I've been really reading into is the idea of Stoic and the Stoic mindset, Marcus Aurelius and the like. So these are people, if you don't know about Stoics, I won't go into the whole history, but if you go back 2,000 years, these are Greeks who came up with a way of thinking, an idea of a mindset that kind of drove their whole life. And the whole thing is around being present and being aware that you cannot affect a lot of the things that happen to you, but you can affect the way you think about them. The fact that you're not going to be here for a long time, so you've got to use that time wisely. So consider the fact that you are going to be mortal, and how do you use your days correctly? And I kind of sort of thought that maybe the Stoic mindset, how would it support effective management and leadership in our day and age? The positive ways and some of the potential pitfalls that could come from using a Stoic mindset. Now, as I said, you can read so much about Stoicism, and you can get yourself onto loads of podcasts. Ryan Holiday does a set of books, The Obstacle is the Way, and all the ideas of the Stoic virtues around the ideas of how they can use courage and the like. So have a listen to them if you want to have a bit more of a deep dive into Stoics as a subject. But I've looked at it in regard to management, because I think there's a lot to be said for a Stoic approach. You know, we know long gone of the days of the screaming banshee leader, you know, coming out of his office and pounding his feet around the shop floor and shouting at people and throwing things and banging on the boardroom table. Those days are long gone. In most areas, I think there's probably a few of these people who still hang around. But I think the Stoicism and the idea of Stoic could be really interesting. So these are my kind of thoughts I've kind of pulled together. There's kind of 10 of them I've pulled together and thought about how they could really help you. And I'm going to look at the positive and the negative. So I'll start at number one, the idea of emotional control under pressure. Now, we all know leadership has pressures. Some of that pressure comes from external, from your boss, from your customers, and some of it comes from your internal. You put pressure on yourself as a leader, and it's something to look out. But if you've got a Stoic mindset, there's this mindset of nothing I am doing is going to really affect this. I cannot control it. So how does that emotional control under pressure work? Well, if you look at the Stoicism in regards to that, you know, a Stoic trained leader, they can remain calm, measured under the pressures, as we said. So there's a rationale during a crisis. So you want someone who can do that. You don't want someone who's panicking and running around. And it prevents panic. It helps the team stay calm. And it supports them good decision making when it really matters. So this is the idea of being this emotionally calm person, that when the Stoics use it, or when you as a leader use Stoicism, it keeps you calm. What can be the negative? Well, of course, too emotional detachment can make some leaders seem cold and unapproachable. Think of your typical Star Trek, you know, your Vulcan, who's just logic. That's not someone who really kind of gets behind it in an emotional sense, and the team would maybe feel unsupported if you're not showing enough empathy or human reaction. So this idea of emotional control is great, but you just got to be aware that there might be too much if you're too detached. And it also looks like you couldn't give a monkeys. You know, if everything's around you is falling to bits and you're just like, oh, well, it'll be fine, not a problem. That's not what we mean when we're talking emotional control under pressure. Talking about someone who gets things done but doesn't panic, keeps his head or her head calm. But, of course, on the other side, can be too far attached. So that's number one, emotional control under pressure. Number two, the focus on what you control. A massive part of Stoicism is the idea of I cannot control things that happen to me. There's lots of Dr. Frankel, who was a prisoner of, well, not prisoner of war, unfortunately, was a Jewish person in one of the work camps and concentration camps, and he used his Stoic thoughts that whatever those people are going to do to me, they're going to do it. I can't affect them. All I can affect is my brain and how I react to them. And he came through it and wrote some good literature. Fighter pilot as well, who survived through the Vietnam War. Same, he kind of detached himself, became there. So becoming focused on what you can control. So Stoic concentrates on energy only on controllable factors. And I think I've said this on this podcast, I definitely have. Controllable as a leader. So this avoids you wasting effort and reducing, it reduces frustration. And it keeps your team aligned on the practical solutions instead of those pointless blame games. So that's the positive of being focused on what you can control. The negative, it can be taken too far, and if that mindset may lead to, this idea of, it doesn't matter, it's fine, it's always going to be, I'm going to accept poor conditions rather than making the system better because it's just outside my control. What could I possibly do? And it could be that it makes you mean that there's no point in influencing or affecting it. And of course, as you know, as a manager and leader, you're there to make things happen. You're there to solve problems. You're there to deliver results. So you can't take this idea of the focus on what you control too far and just say, well, it's all to do with the sales. I can't affect it. You've got to affect the things you can affect. So if you're in operations, you're going to affect your cost base, make it cheaper, help the sales team sell more. So that's the 2, focus on what you control. Number 3 is the idea of being consistent and reliable. A Stoic leader are steady and predictable, and it's a fact, especially from an operations background like I come from. Most operations should be boring and consistent because day in, day out, you're normally making the same things. You've got a recipe if you're making food. You've got a assembly if you're making a product. So it should be predictable. Teams trust leaders who respond consistently as well. So, if you're going to be consistent, reliable emotionally as well, then that means that, you're not being too emotional. You're going to build a place that's got this idea of psychological safety. And of course, that means that people are very free to express themselves knowing that they can risk it, but it is in a controlled place. So being consistent and reliable is a positive. On a negative, consistency doesn't mean inflexibility. So, what you could do is that leaders can fall into that, rigid routine or to be too slow to adapt. And if that's too much, then this becomes, you're not going to get anywhere. You have got to be able to move sometimes and you've got to be able to react quickly. So if you're too consistent, reliable, and you've always done it that way, worst thing someone can say, we've always done it this way, then that can affect you. So, all right, consistent reliability is a good thing of a Stoic. But again, as in all these, if you take it too far and you become too consistent in regarding to not being able to bend and break or move, then you're going to have a problem. Imagine, and then you've probably seen this, you go into a building, a government building, and you go to a counter and you've got to fill the V62 form in and you've not done it in black pen and they make you go back and, sorry, you haven't ticked that box or you haven't used the V62.4. That's the idea of it being too rigid, which can be a problem. So that's number 3. Number 4 is the idea of improved decision making. So we all want to make good, quick, reliable and very, steady decisions as a manager. So, and if you're not making decisions, then what you're doing as a leader. Leaders are there to make decisions. They might not be popular, but you're there to make decisions. So a Stoic mindset and the Stoic habits of taking a step back, analysing the situation logically, removing the ego, leads to a better and clearer decision making. So you can improve your decision making by having that. The obstacle is the way is a famous one, that when something is an obstacle, Marcus Aurelius wrote about it, and again Ryan Holiday would have wrote about this. They were the people who would be going around that obstacle, knowing how to get there, and the obstacle became the way. It became, it's in our way, but we can do it. And that's the same thing with this. You're using your logic and your data to get things clearly done and make clear decisions. But of course, as a negative, over-analysis and just making it too slow to make decisions. Again, it creates this perception that the leader just lacks a passion or an urgency. If you're taking too long, you can have aim. Time you fire, boom, the target's gone. So it improves decision making, and of course, caveat as everything, done too much can stop decision making altogether. Number 5, your resilience to a setback. And if this is a surprise, I'm sorry, you will have setbacks, you will have problems, and you will have times where you think, what the heck am I doing this for? If you've got a stoic mindset, it helps you in the positive of viewing challenges as opportunities to test your strength and grow. Leaders bounce back quickly. They maintain perspective and help their teams avoid this catastrophicism, this idea everything's awful, it's the end of the world. That's a big thing that can happen. So when you are a stoic leader, you take a challenge on and go, this is an opportunity for me to grow, it's going to get better. How many times has something failed and you've gone and grown and got better? Inventors, how many times do they have a go and it don't work and they have another go and another go? So that is a positive of that idea of a setback becoming a challenge. Now, on the negative, if you appear unaffected by a setback, people may assume you don't care, or that the stress isn't really recognised. If you're too light in what you've approached, people might think you just don't take things seriously. So you may be resilient to setbacks, but don't look like it's completely not affected you, because you do need to understand if it's a setback that's affected you financially or product-wise, it can make a big impact to a business. So you've got to make sure that you understand, yes, we're going to learn from it, yes, we're going to bounce back quickly, and we're going to get a perspective, and we're going to get our teams avoiding that idea of it happening again, but you can't appear too laid back in your approach. So it's a good resilience to setbacks, but again, not too much. Number 6, it gives you strong personal accountability. So we say this on the show a lot, accountability is what you're there for. There might be a responsibility to give somebody else, but accountability is something you're going to have as a leader. And a stoic leader own their actions and behaviours and development. This modelling encourages a culture of responsibilities and an integrated team, because they know you are going to take responsibility. Jacko Wells and some of the work that he's done, I hope I pronounced that right, I always get that one wrong. He goes about that ultimate leadership. You are ultimately accountable for your team. The negative of this idea is that being, over self-critical or taking too much responsibility can lead to a burnout if you don't have the right mindset. And shielding others for consequences, well, that don't really help them learn. So you can't be too much of a shield. You've got to know your directs, know there's been a problem and know that they've got to improve, but you're taking accountability of it. Number 7, values-driven leadership. So a stoic focus on the virtues, like things like wisdom, courage, patience, fairness, and humility. Leaders who embrace these create respect, loyalty, and a strong culture around them, and a strong team. So when you are driven by values, then you get people on board. They know you care because you're really there. But leaders who are, again, rigidly following a philosophy of ideas may lead to moralisation, judgment, and some sort of lack of empathy again, which can affect relationships. So, you want to make sure that you are human. Stoics are not human. Some people say stoicism is this stiff upper lip. I can hardly say that. Stiff upper lip of the British. It's very stiff upper lip. And it's not really. It's just knowing that you've got these restrictions, but you know that you can do something about it. And you can value people and value their input to your team as a person, not just a machine. So value-driven leadership is a good part of stoicism. Number 8, you're better at conflict management. And we know we're going to have to deal with conflicts because guess what? Humans are involved. And unless you've got rid of them, they're all robots. And I think at one point in AI development, robots will start arguing between themselves, but that's for another day. But you're better at conflict management because stoic leaders don't take things personally. Helping them to de-escalate a conflict and focus on the facts, the solutions, and mutual understanding, which is a big thing, a mutual understanding. Negative, if a leader is too emotionally neutral, again, people just feel that he's being dismissive, he doesn't understand the problem, she's not really getting it, and you're downplaying how big an issue is, especially if you get someone who's quite emotional, very driven by emotion, and you're very much about the data, don't worry, it's all about the facts, let's get to a solution. It can frustrate you doing it in a relationship at home. and you're trying to fix your wife or your boyfriend's or your girlfriend's issues, and you're just being very logical, then it can annoy them because they want an emotional reaction. And it's the same at work. People want to see some emotion, but not too much. But you will be better at conflict management if you boil it down to the facts. You try to de-escalate, and you get to a solution that mutually affects both. Number 9, it reduces stress and burnout. That's another positive, because it's a big thing getting burnt out and stressed in work. But by accepting uncertainties and focus on things that you can do, rather the outcomes, the Stoic leader feels less overwhelmed because they can park things that they cannot affect. If you're in a business that you're making or manufacturing and your sales teams are selling, there's no point in you getting stressed and overwhelmed by the lack of sales because you can't affect that. You can only affect the things you can affect. This sets a healthy tone for your team as well. They will have passion for the things they can affect, but they try not to worry too much about the things you can't, because the stuff outside there you won't be able to affect. Again, Stoics on the negative might stop a leader from showing vulnerability because they're thinking that you've no stress or you're not vulnerable. That's not really true, and you might get the fact that you might ask for help. Because you look like you've isolated it and you've taken the pressure yourself, but it could build under the surface. So be aware if you are reducing the stress using your Stoics, that you are really reducing it and you've got an outlay, either a physical or a hobby or something away from work that can take that away from your family time. So you can de-stress and decompress a day or a week, because it can be quite hard as a leader. And number 10 on my list is improving the long-term thinking. So Stoicism encourages leaders to zoom out, ignore the noise of the minute, avoid the reaction and the behaviour, and make strategical decisions that stand a long time. Those 100-year decisions you'll hear about. So that's a positive, because you get to step away and say, well, what are the real issues here? What are the long-term thinking? Of course, overemphasising the long-term perspective can make leaders slow to act in the present, or uninterested in short-term wins or team motivations because you're thinking too high up. And as in everything, as in fitness, as in hobbies, you've got to have a balance, and it's the same in this. If you go too far one way or too far the other, you're going to have a problem with the idea of Stoicism. So let's, in summary, just bring it together. A Stoic mindset can be a huge advantage for leaders. It's calm under fire. It's focusing on what's happening and what matters. It's driving value and using values to drive that. It gives you resilience. It helps you be balanced, and it helps you be rational. But like any other approach, it has a shadow side. It can risk emotional distance. It can perceive a lack of urgency. It can be overly rigid in some ideas, and it can reduce sometimes empathy. Those are the things I've gone through today, and I just wanted a quick whiz through just to give you an idea that Stoicism, have a read into it, look into it. You may be already practicing some of that, you don't even know, but have a look at how they can do it, how it can make you better under pressure, gets you focused on what you can control, makes you more consistent. It can improve your decision making. It gives you resilience when you have those setbacks. It gives you accountability, which is important for people. It gives you values that you can rally people around. It helps you diffuse conflicts. It can reduce that idea of stress and burnout to yourself, and it improves your long-term thinking. Now, what's your long-term thinking now? Well, I'm hoping it's to rate this show, share this show and pass it on. Also, send me any feedback to managermattpodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear what you think about being a Stoic or not being a Stoic. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thank you again so much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.